Dr. John Shook. He is the Vice President for Education Research and Senior Research Fellow at the Center for Inquiry in Amherst, New York. He is also a Research Associate in Philosophy at the University of Buffalo. His latest book is The God Debates, a 21st Century Guide for Atheists and Believers and Everyone in Between. There's more information about the book outside. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, good evening, and thank you very much for coming out tonight. I think it's going to be a fascinating evening. We have two marvelous debaters with us tonight. It's my honor to introduce them both, and then I'll briefly describe the debate format that's going to go on until about 8:15, at which point you'll be able to ask your questions. There are two microphones here, and we'll just simply take as many questions as we can, switching back and forth between the microphones, indicate who you're addressing your question to, and be sure you're asking a question as briefly as possible. It is my additional honor to cut anyone off who seems to be giving a speech, but I'm sure that won't happen. Tonight's format is all about morality. How do we define morality? Do people need God to be moral? If not, where do our morals come from? Are good works just behavioral, or biological, or biblical? What does it mean to be human? And can a person be fully human without God? Our two speakers tonight are Matt Dillahunty and Father Hans Jacobsey. Matt Dillahunty is the president of the Atheist Community of Austin in Texas. He is host of the popular public access television and internet show called The Atheist Experience. He was raised as a fundamentalist Baptist, and he was on track to become a minister until he started asking questions about the reasons for his belief. He rejected religion and now serves as public voice for rationality and secular morality. Father Hans Jacobsey is an Antiochian Orthodox priest. He administers the website Orthodoxy Today, and he heads the American Orthodox Institute. Father Hans is convinced that Orthodox Christianity has an important part to play in the American moral renewal. He views the current world as a battle between competing moral visions of the secular and the sacred, and he hopes that Christianity can restore the moral traditions of the Gospels. Please welcome our speakers. Finally, a sketch of the format tonight, and then we'll get started. Each speaker will have 10 minutes to make their opening remarks and statement of their position. Then each will have 5 minutes to react directly to what the other has said in their opening address. Then there'll be a brief period where each will have an opportunity to address some new question that has occurred to them to the other, and the other may reply, and then we'll switch. The other one will ask a question, and the first one will reply. That'll go fairly briefly because we're going to then proceed to a final closing statement by each of 5 minutes, and I have cards here to remind them when they need to be done. At about 8:15, the formal debate will be over, and then, as I said, we'll proceed to the question and answer. So let's get started. The first speaker by toss of the coin is Matt Dillahunty, who now has 10 minutes to make his opening remarks.
Thank you all for attending. I'm not going to waste a whole bunch of time thanking, but I really do appreciate the fact that everybody came out for this and the groups that got together to put this event on. Morality is often an overwhelming and complicated topic, and I think personally that this need not be the case. It's often muddled by seemingly insoluble moral dilemmas, and this is unlikely to change in the near future, and I have no illusions about being able to solve this problem tonight, even if either one of us fundamentally changes our position at the end of the debate, and how likely is that? What we're talking about tonight, though, is the source of morality. From what do we derive our values, and by what method do we make moral assessments? This sort of cuts to the heart of the issue and allows us to spend less time debating perhaps specific moral dilemmas and more time investigating the common ground and where we differ and why, and is there any potential solution to this. And actually, the topic isn't the source of morality. It was listed as the source of human morality. And when I was first told this, I immediately latched onto that distinction and planned to point out that humans aren't the source of porpoise morality or dog morality, and therefore I was going to claim victory by the human adjective in front of it, that clearly humans are the source of human morality. And I realized very quickly that not only was this wrong and incorrect, but that I had uncritically stepped into a trap of a hidden assumption that leads directly to moral relativism. And I am not a moral relativist. It's important to recognize those types of errors, to identify where we make assumptions and where we buy into things that we probably shouldn't, where we have colored the nature of the question such that we cannot reach an accurate answer. There is no human morality, there is only morality. Morality is an all-encompassing because there is nothing that cannot be assessed with respect to values. That assessment results in labeling something moral, immoral, or amoral. And the source of morality, I say, is reason. When I speak about morality, I'm referring to the method by which we derive and apply our values, both the core values and what we do with them. I spent the past 5 years discussing this subject and others on the TV show and podcast, but for the past year or so, I've been traveling the country speaking at universities and secular groups. Specifically, the title of the topic, which I don't know, some of you may have seen that particular lecture, was The Superiority of Secular Morality. In that time, I've run across frequent objections to secular morals, and I thought this might be a good time to quickly address just two of the more common ones. The first is this idea that secular morality borrows from religious morality. And it takes one of two forms. The first is that secular moral systems are simply recognizing some innate moral compass ostensibly put in there by God. And that's a nice assertion, but I'd argue that any internal moral compass that we have is a function of our position as both reasoning and empathetic creatures, and that it is in fact religion that co-opts the natural aspect of humans and adds to it this idea by means of explaining something that they at the time perhaps did not understand, why we are the way we are. And while that's a nice assertion and there's a possibility that it could be true, that is something that actually needs to be demonstrated. The second form that this argument often takes is that morality has traditionally fallen within the purview of the religious elite or the schools of religious thought. And I find that argument just ineffectual because we are very much a species that builds off of what we've learned. So what does it matter if we learned things from religious individuals, great thinkers? There have been great thinkers in many different categories, but the fact that a great thinker about morality happened to be religious is no more a testament to the truth of their religious assertions than that a great thinker in the field of astronomy happened to also be religious. The information that they come by does not point necessarily to inspiration from some external source. The second big objection to secular morality that I get presented with is this issue that there is no external authority. This often comes in the form of a common sense argument, as in, you cannot be good without God. But the more robust versions assert that secular moral systems have this seemingly terrifying problem of having no definitive authority. Each individual's conscience supposedly dictates what they consider right or wrong, and secular systems wind up with competing claims and no clear resolution. I argue that this is exactly the situation that we have with religious moralities. The claim, by the way, that there are no easy solutions if there's no external authority seems entirely backward to me. First of all, why should we seek a method that's easy? Shouldn't we be seeking a method that's right? Shouldn't we be seeking a method that leads to truth? Easy answers are not always the right ones. The fact that morality is complicated and requires thought and effort doesn't mean that we should opt for an easier solution just to save ourselves time. What we have are competing religious ideas about morality between religions and within religions. Christian morality, Muslim morality, Buddhist, Jain, Jewish. And without a given religion, and within a given religion, take Christianity for example, we have competing claims from within that religion. Clergy are not of any one mind about what their God want and often can't agree on how to interpret the messages of their sacred texts or the inspiration that they claim to get, especially when dealing with moral dilemmas that aren't explicitly covered by the text, and sometimes even when they are. Until some God actually comes forward and clearly and plainly informs everyone of exactly what its moral views are, we can't know. How could we know? Everything else is just pretense. And if some God actually does come forward and clearly and plainly inform everyone as to what its moral views are, what makes those views right? This has been addressed by the Youth for Dilemma and many objections, and the truth of the matter is that the individuals advocating religious moralities make two major unsupported assumptions. The first is that a God exists, and the second is that this God is perfectly moral. They're convinced that this solves a problem, though the solution cannot exist until the premises are demonstrated to be true. The dirty little secret here is that even if these were true, they're still irrelevant because we're the ones making decisions about what we consider moral, immoral, or amoral. Now, this isn't a statement about each individual's opinion. This is just about the scope. We cannot do this beyond our ability to comprehend. It would, I contend, be immoral to hold any being responsible beyond its ability to comprehend. We generally already understand this. We teach our children, and we apportion responsibility in accordance with their comprehension. Would it not similarly be immoral, wrong, for some more advanced being who supposedly has a better moral understanding than us to hold us accountable to standards that we cannot comprehend? Clearly, there must be a demonstration of efficacy with regard to a path to truth. When we're talking about morals, we're talking about what's right and wrong. We are making statements about reality, and we are making statements that are truth statements that have some value. Why do we teach our children? Because we understand that reason is the source of morality. I'm going to run short on time in order to get all this in. There's a section in the talk that I've given before where I contrast secular value systems and religious value systems. And I'll skip past that other than to say that the distinction is that one is internal and the other is external. One is about the data and results driven, and the other is about coercion, about convincing by means other than data, by an element of faith or whatever. That one is a robust system that is built as we progress, and the other is generally pre-built and incomplete. We are left on our own. Morality, if it's to mean anything, deals with how thinking beings interact and the impact their actions have on one another. These assessments can and should be the result of exploration, investigation, evidence, much thought, and healthy debate. Advocates of religious morality like to pretend that religious morality solves problems that plague secular moral systems. Not only are these problems not solved, they're not problems. Morality does not require a definitive external authority. It is the natural product of thinking, empathetic beings trying to survive and thrive while sharing resources. It is a truth to be discovered, not a rule to be disseminated. We have the tools we need and we should continue to use them. We have a brain. We have the ability to reason. We have the ability to assess the consequences of our actions. We have the ability to look at and compare what values we hold with respect to the results those values deliver. And when we find that either the core values are in conflict or that the results of any given core value is in conflict with desired results from other core values, we can then rewrite the core values. This is exactly what has happened. Many religious individuals and groups have modified their personal sense of morality away from the foundations of their religion, which in most cases remains unchanged, and they've realigned themselves with the values encouraged by secular progressives. They have, for all intents and purposes, adopted the views of secular systems of morality while clinging to the traditional foundation, rationalizing the conflict away with personal interruptions. They have, in a very real sense, adopted the secular moral system as a new external source for their morality.